Indeed, the way it is on this Monday, it is now 7:10 a.m. Welcome back to Morning Express. We're glad you're watching. Joining me in studio now, Benji Ndolo, founder of One, and Tony Gachoka, political strategist. Gentlemen, good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you both.
Morning, Sophie.
For being part of our show. What are you doing on the iPad, Benji?
Oh, getting ready for battle. Tony is not easy to deal with, by the way. Tony is not easy to deal with at all.
Really?
Yes.
This is not going to be war. We're going to simply just have a discussion.
It probably will be war.
Yeah?
Yes.
We're going to start, of course, with what has been unfolding over at the ICC, Assembly of State Parties. It's an 8-day meeting, so it continues starting today. They took, of course, a break over the weekend. And one of the issues that came up last week was the video link question, and the fact that the UK is now pushing for the same, saying that that is actually a good way for Kenya to go in as far as the involvement and participation of the president and his deputy in their trials. I've moved now that also we've seen Jubilee members now say no. And yet we know in the past the president had himself, through his legal defense team, legal counsel, applied for the same. So what do you make of that situation, Tony?
If I may, let me first of all support the United Kingdom government unequivocally.
Okay.
I think that the amendment to have the video link in terms of the rules and procedures of the ICC court is a very important step.
Yes.
And perhaps the most important step for Anglo-Kenya relations since the Mau Mau payoff. I think the members of parliament and some of the people who surround the president have been very quick to condemn the UK because of ignorance. They must understand that even if you try to seek immunity, which first of all I think will be very difficult to get 81 votes, and even if you were to get it, Uhuru is not al-Bashir. He's not the standard. You cannot have a blanket immunity for any heads of state. Some of these people are real gangsters, and you can't want your president put at the same level with the Sudanese president, for example. And therefore, even noble as it is, the idea of immunity will not clear his name. But the idea of having the video link allows him to hold the dignity of the office, to be able to discharge his defense without the country going through the embarrassment of a sitting head of state, sitting at the Hague. And already we have the support of the African Union, Sophie. In a war such as we have, an international war for justice, you need everybody on board. So if you have the African Union, you must welcome the involvement of the United Kingdom, because with them, they bring you a lot of force. America, perhaps many parts of Europe, who were not supposed, otherwise going to vote with you. And therefore, I think that would be a consensus motion, which can be voted on this week. And I want to emphasize that it will have immediate legal effect, because it is a procedural change to the rules of the statute, whereas the other one would need to be written to the UN, Ban Ki-moon, and they would take a year.
The immunity one.
The immunity one would take even a year at best, even to be effected at all.
All right. So for you, the argument is the Jubilee members who are criticizing the UK ignorant people.
They're ignorant. These are the same MPs who said, go to the Hague, don't be vague.
Don't be vague.
You must disregard them. They actually don't know. In fact, the lawyers of the president, as you rightly said, have already made a motion before the ICC asking for video link. Now, who is the lawyer for the president? Is it Duale or is it Stephen K?
Okay.
Sophia, allow me to give a little background on ICC. And just to agree with Tony, and I really must commend Tony really for some of the work he has done, even on such shows as Jeff Koinange Live, which is one of your shows, to just expose the ignorance, the laziness, the psychopathy of some of these members of parliament. Because truth be told, some of these members of parliament got elected on the platform of ICC by themselves saying, look, I'm an Uhuru guy, I am very grieved and aggrieved. I am grieving worse than the bereaved, and so elect me. And then after that, they have really engaged on really a misadventure, a strategy for the most part that has been going nowhere. And if you listen to them carefully, you realize that in a way, you wonder, are they speaking on behalf of Uhuru and Ruto, or are they speaking on their own behalf? Because the strategy, if I may, has been quite flawed in many ways from the beginning. And so I wish the president would listen to the likes of Tony, so that some of the things that they're asking for are pragmatic, are balanced, so that you're not seeming to be outrageous. And of course, one of the big mistakes is that it has seemed that they're trying to do everything to you know, sometimes we have to translate and listen to the words that they're using and, you know, translate those words to words that Kenyans can understand. So when you talk about deferral, to me, it looks like that's a way of killing it. And of course, seeking for immunity, in essence, is, you know, that process is missing the P, which would be impunity. So, you know, you've got to really understand and listen carefully to what these guys are saying. But having said that, let me just expose, in my opinion, in my reading, because I like to analyze this stuff, the concerns that some of these guys might have of the video link. I think that the concerns for the video link is that it, in essence, is another way of saying that the president is prosecutable. In other words, it's another way of agreeing to prosecute. So that once you agree and that is codified, then there are what you call caveats that come with that. For example, you know, he may have to appear at the beginning of the trial. He may have to appear for special witness testimony. He may have to appear for final hearing and sentencing and that kind of thing. And so I think that is their concern. But if I was to advise Uhuru on this thing, I think that a lot of things that Amina is trying to do are not achievable. For example, what they're trying to do in at the Assembly of State Parties this weekend, it's almost impossible to get that threshold. A lot of the countries that were, you know, making a lot of noise at the AU are now, you know, feigning ignorance or, you know, pretending to be very astonished that the Kenyan constitution actually has not a provision for immunity. And so they're saying, oh, we did know that at the AU. Additionally, you know, how you need 3 months, you know, procedurally for any of these things to be then drafted and then passed at plenary and ratified. 3 months is less than what we have to February 5th. So it's almost again an exercise from the beginning.
But one thing I think that must be emphasized.
Yes.
As much as I don't agree with some of the strategies of Amin Abdallah is trying to do at the Assembly of State Parties.
Yes.
There is a pat on the back to the president's government for being able for the first time since the Pan-African movement began to unite Africa. And Africa speaking in one voice is a major achievement in the international political field. I think Uhuru probably will go down in Kenyan history as one of the strongest Kenyan presidents for the Pan-African movement. You really only have to compare him only with his father, I think. And I think that is a very strong issue. The other issue that I think is very strong is having to achieve the support of China and Russia. I mean, to get 7 votes of the United Nations Security Council, and the threshold was 9, was a remarkable achievement for Kenyan diplomacy. And you know, sometimes you win without winning. The fact that you get 7 and you were only 2 short, I mean, there is no doubt that Kenya's muscle has been felt in the international sphere. And I also want to say this, just like I said, the British bowed down to the Mau Mau case and settled out of court. For the British government, Kenya's biggest trading business partner, to come down from its hardline position and now itself is sponsoring a motion asking for video link is a major political international achievement for Kenya agro relations. And I want to underline this and say that a country like England, a superpower in the world arena, doesn't just wake up in the morning and decide to change its opinion. It's because of the force that has been gathered by this rolling stone from the African Union, by speaking in one voice and taking it all the way to the UN. The countries have to readdress how they deal with the African continent. So nobody is saying that Africa should be tamed. Nobody is saying that Africa should not speak in support of one of their own. What Africa is also complaining about in the ICC is also fair, that all the 7 cases before the court are all from Africa. What is happening in Syria today? What is happening in the Middle East? Where are all these other leaders in other hotspots in the world? Have they ever been targeted by the ICC? Is the ICC the policeman for the West to take care of Africa? Those are important questions that should not be, I think, brought down in any way. They should remain at the top of international debate and discussion. But that is a very different issue from what I was agreeing with my brother Benjamin, which is a legal issue. The problem is the politicians are mixing some politics with legal issues.
I've always said
the president is facing a legal case before the ICC. Now, if you want 1 in the hand and 2 in the bush, take the video link first, which means the president will never travel from Kenya to face humiliation at The Hague. So already, if that is on the table and can be achieved this week at the Assembly of State Parties, then all the world should support that. Now imagine a verdict of international consensus where instead of division, we get actually overwhelming support. Yeah. Europe, Africa, China, Russia, all of them in acceptance or in agreement with the video link issue. It would be a political coup d'etat for the president. He would have won mileage, international mileage. But to be put in the hands of Alwa and Duale and people like this, to insult sovereign countries who are only bringing before the State Assembly of State Parties amendments for discussion that I think are helpful is not important or useful to the president's legal strategy.
Yeah.
But I must disagree, Tony, slightly. I must disagree. But that to rally the entire continent to save your own skin is not necessarily the definition of heroism. That must be said, because in a way,
but
you
the
have
fact
to
that
ask,
he was able to rally.
Yeah, but to what end? When was the last time we saw an African leader, a president, rally an entire continent or the world against hunger in a real and practical way? These are things that we have to, because again, the perception out there is that, you know, are we going to use powerful offices, the presidency, the institution of the presidency, to save your own skin from persecution?
May I disagree on allegations? Could I, Benjamin, you and I know each other for a while.
Yes.
But please, I never like speaking from the community I come from. As you know, I like speaking as a Kenyan. Of course. But one of the tragedies of this case is that Mwai Kibaki and Raila Odinga should be at The Hague. President Kenyatta and William Ruto should not be there. And you know very well, under Article 19 of the Rome Statute, the people with the highest political responsibility are the people who are meant to be at The Hague. One of the problems that I have is people keep forgetting that President Kenyatta was the leader of the official opposition at the material time. He's said to have led this PNU so-called struggle. There are very many flawed issues as to who chose who to go to The Hague. And one of the problems I have with this, and I've debated this matter with Senator Umar Hassan, was, for example, the existence of two human rights reports. One which was dated in July, where Prime Minister Raila Odinga was recommended to be charged with crimes against humanity. They talked about further investigations against President Kenyatta. But then the later version of August specifically talked about charging President Kenyatta, and Raila's name mysteriously disappeared. Then there is this mystery, Sophie, of the envelope of 20. Can I ask you, where in the world have you ever seen a sitting president, Mwai Kibaki, for example, call a man called Anan, who has no legal mandate, other than coming in to help Kenya as a friend? You give him a blank envelope, you don't know what is in it. He takes it to Ocampo, and Ocampo from 20, he chooses 6. Under what criteria? How did he choose them? You know, with the due process. So there are many issues that Africa has raised. It's not just the issue of the presidency facing, you know, a trial, but people are asking, was the process proper? Was this thoroughly done? Tony, was there capacity?
Tony, while I hear you, right. I think we have to attempt to steer this thing away from the kind of divisive, you know, propaganda that it has turned out to be. While I hear you loud and clear, Tony, I must remind you that we are all in Kenya, so we all know what happened. And the fact of the matter is that, yes, there is political responsibility, but there's also legal, you know, culpability and legal responsibility. As has been often reported, a lot of these meetings that are supposed to have happened, you know very well the temperament and the character of the former president, Mwai Kibaki. You know very well, and you have worked as a chief protocol officer for Raila Odinga, that to me, what it taught me is that there is a lot of wisdom sometimes with age. I mean, these guys know that certain things were done for ODM to come into power, for certain people to, I mean, because 600,000 Kikuyus, or Kenyans if you may, were evicted, and someone did a lot of the work behind this. And so we cannot try the matter on KTN, we cannot try the matter in political barazas and rallies. The truth of the matter is that what I've advised is, once everything is taken to the trial, then you ensnare other people as it were. But to attempt to, you know, pillage the whole case, you know, in barazas, in funerals and what have you, in the media, I don't think, you could argue it's had some achievements, but I personally don't believe in the politics of propaganda, of brainwashing, of manipulation in that way, of the siege mentality, which you have to agree.
Could I ask a question?
Which you have to agree, no matter how we go. No matter how we go, there's a huge siege mentality with this administration that is threatening a lot of things. I know you were jailed in 1999. You agree with me, Tony. We don't want any semblance of that kind of thing, especially after the progressive change revolution that we had in this country in 2002, while I was away and everybody was talking about the peaceful transition of power in a small country in Africa called Kenya. 10 years later, you don't want to start threatening NGOs and media, and I'm sure you agree with that. I agree, but
so we have to look at... I have two questions for you, because I agree with you. And I'll be very quick about this. Look, the international community last month was on serious case. In fact, the House of Commons rejected Prime Minister Cameron's singular desire to bomb the Assad regime. President Obama was defeated by the democratic forces and Republican forces, both rejecting the bombing of Syria. And Syria is committing crimes against humanity using chemical warfare. The issue that I'm raising here is this, that when atrocities around the world are going on, and there seems to be a kind of a target or witch hunt to Africa, there is nothing wrong with the president and the continent meeting as a body of countries and states and expressing to the world, hold on, as Africans we feel that you are coming to us in the wrong way, and they go to the Assembly of State Parties for which that was created, and that forum is the proper forum, in my view, better than the UN, for Africa to express itself.
For clarity's sake,
allow me to the second point, President Clinton was charged when he was a sitting president on the Lewinsky issue. So I don't see how it is a problem for a sitting president, as long as there is dignity and decorum in facing charges which are before him and clearing his name. President Clinton was not impeached by the Senate. He was heard and his case was over. And all I am saying, the video link evidence or support system is going to allow this president to clear his good name, and hopefully Mwai Kibaki and Raila Odinga will be charged as they should be before the ICC.
President Clinton was my president. I'm just making the final response. I don't think you can compare a case to criminal, to mass murder charges. And we're not saying anybody's guilty. We're just saying that we have to be fair.
You're talking about shielding the office. That's what I was addressing. Clinton could not use his office to shield himself. And I'm saying to the president, who is a good friend of mine, and coming from me, you should believe me, he's hearing me. The president should not use his office not to have this trial. He should have it via video link. And that's the solution that has come, because we want the dignity of the office. We want him to
Benji, you mentioned something very quickly, because Tony was talking about the fact that this has seen the president rally the support of the continent, and also the diplomatic efforts that have been put together have really seen Kenya also just in terms of muscle and having its voice heard in the international community. You disagree though?
I disagree, because I think that as journalist Murithi Mutiga put it very well, I think 2 or 3 weeks ago, lately Kenya in the news for all the wrong reasons, for really all the wrong reasons. So for those of us who work very hard and have very high aspirations for this country, who believe that we can do better, we're just now about a month from the 50-year mark. Where I was just saying on social media the other day, and by the way, I think, Tony, you're on social media, this is a point I was making. I called for the ouster of Bashar al-Assad, who has by now killed about 11,000 people in 2011. I supported very strongly, and power of social media is, I imagine who is on your social media as is Associated Press and what have you. It's very important to take positions and to be heard. And so, absolutely, Bashar al-Assad should have gone a long, long time ago. But having said that,
we should agree with Sophie.
But having said that, when was the last time you were talking about celebrating 50 years next month? And I put this on social media the other day. It struck me, I saw it somewhere, that at the beginning of independence of this country, Sophia, ignorance, disease, and poverty, IDP, were the biggest challenges that Jomo Kenyatta talked about. And 50 years down the road, we actually have IDPs. We have almost more of the same. I am not one of those, pseudo-nationalists that will run around and, wear the Kenyan flag as my scarf and say, because I don't believe in rhetoric per se. But I think we can do better.
If I could just comment there, because I think she brought up a very important issue that you cannot wish away. Right now, Kenya is having a quiet war with Tanzania. Why is Kenya having a war with Tanzania? It's very simple. Uhuru Kenyatta has managed to achieve tremendous growth in Africa. Rwanda, Burundi, Southern Sudan, Uganda. Kenya is the preferred port of entry for their goods and services. This it amounts to billions of shillings in infrastructure development. The president this Thursday will open the new railway system, our road networks, the port of Mombasa.
And we're also seeing Uhuru being tipped for ESC chair.
Exactly. And I want to make this very clear. The East African community is being reconstructed under the Uhuru presidency. So much so that even frosted relations we used to have with Uganda. If you remember, Museveni has always been a controversial person in terms of the diplomatic relations with Kenya. Uhuru has managed to transcend that. He has an excellent relationship with very hard-working presidents of impeccable character like Kagame. People who have brought benefit to the continent.
I don't know about impeccable character.
But I think what he's done in Rwanda, and I've visited that
he's done a very good job.
Really, I mean, top-notch civil service.
But there's also been killing of journalists.
I want us to move on from this particular issue, closing sentiments on the same, and what we're likely to see come Wednesday, in as far as especially that vote on the immunity. Of course, voices, analysts have argued that...
Just before I take that.
It's like unlikely to sail through.
Just before I take that, I was looking at some notes that I've taken here before. Sometimes you want to look back and say, what is Kenya's biggest enemy? And it seemed to me like, in a way, capitalism, corruption, and one more, and conmanship, in a way. Because our political system has been about pure and complete conmanship. You know, align yourself with a tribe, get the, you know, blanket party of that tribe and get in. And then you've got people who don't pay taxes, who don't believe in anything, who have no idea. And so we have got to look back, I think, and think, where have we gone wrong, Sophia? You know, are we as a country exactly where we should be? And so as we talk about Tanzania, the point I want to make is, if things were as gravy as Tony Gachoka tries to portray it, then the leader of the free world and the president of the only superpower in the world would have come home and not gone to Tanzania. So those tensions are there. I think that President Kikwete has done a very good job to be a very progressive Democrat. I think that you've not had any sort of allegation to the magnitude of those facing Museveni, Kagame, Uhuru Kenyatta. And let me remind Tony that even as we speak, there's a huge pitfall, and that's why you see a lot of anger against the ICC with whatever is unfolding in the war in Congo.
I think we should disagree without being disagreeable, just on that one point, which is an important point, of foreign policy. Because I think, Sophie, you're really bringing sophistication in Kenyan journalism, because the things we are discussing are so crucial. For example, I believe American foreign policy has collapsed. The reason Obama was elected was because George Bush ran one of the worst foreign policies America has ever seen. It became a pariah, almost. They call it a superpower. By the time Obama was being elected,
Bush was crazy.
By the time Obama was being elected, nobody, the anti-Americanism
But I want
was
to touch
everywhere.
on this as you talk about foreign policy, and that is one of the issues that has been making headlines as well. The question is, we are seeing more of the snapping and very harsh talk in as far as the West is concerned, and more friendly conversations.
And I want to agree with you there and condemn it in the strongest words possible.
Right.
Those people in the Kenya government, whether you are Amina Abdallah or members of parliament, who go and perform undiplomatic language because you agree or disagree with any part of a statement by a sovereign nation, that is not diplomacy. The way in which the UK amendment was handled badly. That was for backroom politics. In fact, right now, if President Kenyatta is watching, and I hope he is, I'll take out the phone and ring Cameron and tell him, by the way, how can we whip up members by Wednesday? So we have an overwhelming vote for the video link. In fact, this should be actually an added advantage.
So that tough talk bashing,
not at all, because we already have the support of Africa.
It's reckless.
We have the support of Africa, Sophie. We have the support of China. We have the support of Russia. Why would you refuse the support of the UK? Why would you refuse even American support? So right now, it's a wholesome game. You want everybody in, not everybody out. The final statement, if you remember, I don't know which American president talked about Edgar Hoover. You better have him in the tent. I'm sorry,
J. Edgar Hoover.
Edgar Hoover. You rather have him helping himself, pissing from inside the tent, than from outside pissing in. So what I am saying is, Kenya needs, in my own view, the West, not as an adversary, but as an ally. And the way to do so is to reduce and diffuse some of the things that divide us.
But unfortunately, just to show you the kind of predicament we're in, Sophia, who are Kenya's latest new friends? Chad, Azerbaijan, China, Russia. What is the track record? I believe that apart from these politics, Tony Gachoka is or has the potential of being one of the best rights champions in this country. What are some of the track records of some of these guys? Kagame, as far as free media and journalism is concerned. China, after Tiananmen Square, and you know, I think you don't even have Facebook in China. I haven't been there, and frankly, I don't want to go. Russia, you know, Putin, a guy who was president, went, designated himself prime minister, set himself to come back as president. Where in the world has that ever happened?
The government being reckless, trying to paint the West as the enemy.
And being seen, exactly, and being seen as desperate.
Tony, allow me to finish. Ndolo is very, very intelligent.
No.
But the point he's making is this. When it suits America's foreign policy, they soften their stand on China. Right now, there is a softening between Iran and America. It's in the US's interest to talk to the enemy of America. Iran is now on the table, and Obama and the supreme leader of Iran are reading from the same script. The one of the issue of the nuclear issue and so forth, because it's in the interest of both countries to talk. Okay. What I'm saying, in Kenya's advance in its foreign policy, there is nothing wrong with President Kenyatta overwhelmingly becoming one of the top leaders of Africa and East Africa community. It brings pride to this nation. It gives pride to me as a young man, seeing a young man finding people like Museveni, old guys on the block, and actually being able to outrun them and bring back Kenya's dignity.
Benji,
I must remind Tony several things, and again, I think that it's only the politics sometimes of the day that gets in the way. I must remind Tony that 60%, more than 60% of direct foreign investment in Kenya historically is from England, where I believe he went to school. Me, I don't even understand many things about the British culture, so I'm not going to sit here on a national platform to say that Britain is, you know, the best or whatever. Not at all. But what I'll say is this, that if we, you know, for me, it's about Kenya first, by the way, Tony. It's not so much about Uhuru. It's not about, you know, what did Ruto do, why, when did he do it. It's really about what can we do to move this country with such fantastic raw resources. Can you imagine how many of our young people, I just came from Kitui yesterday, people are just lounging in towns, jobless, young people. And just imagine if we could get Germany to open a wiring harness for one of your favorite cars. He has a very nice Beamer that I saw the other day, but let me not digress. Here on Mombasa Road.
Okay.
If we could open, you know, I wish we got to the point of stability and a shining beacon of hope as a nation, where countries like the States that have their own challenges, I just came from Cyprus, are very neat, and Greece, a fantastically neat bunch of countries that are having absolute financial crisis. And you wonder, where is the problem? Because these are very advanced and developed countries that in essence can partner with a country like Kenya and actually pour money here.
Sophie,
that's a very important point, Tony.
I want to
we don't want to just look at the extractionist policy of China.
No, I'm agreeing with him, but I just wanted to bring on Sophie.
I think you must.
The biggest political competitor of Uhuru Kenyatta is the former Prime Minister Raila.
Yeah.
And having been his director of protocol, I can tell you this: he had a very aggressive foreign policy. In fact, he was so well known, not only within the continent, but beyond.
Yeah.
And part of his power base was being seen to be reliable within the international community.
Okay.
So I want to say quickly in summary that having an international identity is not a negative in political pursuit of power. It is a necessary pursuit.
Okay.
And Raila is a formidable international player. And so Uhuru had to match him, foot for foot, eye to eye. And Uhuru has done that. It is a remarkable
I
thing.
want your quick comments on this one as we move on to the William Ruto case, which we so postponed to January. But last week, the Uasin Gishu deputy governor ejecting UK officials from a meeting. What did you read into that?
Unacceptable, Sophia. You cannot have...
He said they did not follow protocol.
No. You cannot have the kind of actions that, you know, after all this negative exposure in the media, that starts to send the signal and the message out there that Kenya is a banana republic. I'll just be honest with you. When I traveled just a few weeks ago, I get a copy of the long New York Times in the plane. Guess what is on page 6? Kenyan press under attack from Kenya police. And then a whole story on that. And to be honest, I actually kept a copy and took it to Kimayo and said, look, you have got to not misrepresent yourself. You have got to get things in the right manner. But as soon as you start to threaten, you know, KTN or whatever media house or Journal Anamu and whatnot, this does not just end within the borders of Kenya.
So
the
that
message gets out
particular
quickly.
incident...
Absolutely. I mean, this starts to show a pattern, a campaign against, civil society, a campaign against defenders. And what do civil society do? I'm not saying they're, angels. They're perfect. I've heard them referred to as evil society. But let's remember that they provide checks and balances and oversight. And he knows very well the work that Mars Group do. Very professional. It could be controversial in a way, but very difficult work to oversight the treasury, expenditure of public money, to defend human rights, all right, to stand for certain ideals, and also to fund, such things as water projects and roads.
So the deputy governor was out of line.
He was absolutely out of line. I would rush in like that and to eject. I mean, that is. I can imagine he's ejecting people who have a hotline to the Prime Minister David Cameron to say, actually, we felt scared, we felt endangered, we could have been attacked. That was so shallow and so wrong.
I mean, it was unacceptable conduct and behavior. But on the higher platform, Sophia, it's also what happened in Parliament when they came for the media on the Kenya Amendment Bill. I watched and I couldn't believe, because I know the Speaker of the National Assembly as a friend, but I never knew he's incompetent. I really find it scary that the Speaker of the National Assembly does not understand the Constitution. Before you can even debate the so-called Kenya Amendment Communication Bill, first of all, it has to be constitutional. So you must put the question. If Marende was there, I can assure you, even Kaparo, that motion would never have been debated. It would not be on the president's table because it was unconstitutional to start with. But I wanted to emphasize this issue of this governor behavior in Eldoret as people who don't understand the new constitution. Under the new constitution, so many things have been guaranteed: the freedom of association, the freedom of expression, the freedom of ideas and sharing and communicating. That the archaic time when the state was a police on how you think, who gathers where, has no place in the modern society. And I think I want to tell you this: the President Kenyatta is now going to be 6 months in office. I expect incumbency problems in the first year. If you remember that the Kibaki administration, there were many people who left: Matere Kireri, Murungaro, Alfred Gitonga, Meraria, in that period of the beginning, the teething problem. I expect that through programs like this, we will have some casualties in the Kenyatta administration. People who basically don't just get it. There are people, look at the Westgate, mess. I mean, 4 men holding a country hostage for 4 days with the whole army and the police, and nobody has gone home. Geshangi should have gone, Karangi should have gone, or Lenku should have gone. Kemayo has been unable to dispense his job as a Inspector General of Police. I feel less safe today as a Kenyan than I felt when the Inspector Generalship was created.
And the reason you feel less safe, Tony, is because you ask yourself, because I know he's a very logical guy, what would happen if that Al-Shabaab cell now sends 20 guys? That's why you feel unsafe.
Question on William Ruto, Deputy President, back in the country. The trial postponed to January, because witnesses were not well lined up. They were not available to continue with trial. And this is some of the hitches, or they were scared. We actually, don't know exactly what, but some of the very many hitches and struggle we are seeing the prosecution facing in regard and in as far as putting a very strong case is concerned. Very quick comment, Benji.
I think I was the first to go on this show and commend the courage of William Ruto. I think that what Ruto has done is, and which is quite remarkably different from what his counterpart has done. I think that Ruto has sent out the message to his community and to the country that there is not a warrior as brave as he. Because as you can see, no matter how slippery it is, no matter the risks, the challenges, Ruto has been very eager to get on with the case.
Yes.
I think there's potential for big returns on this. I know there's been issues with witnesses, but in a way that
and
is...
big returns, you mean?
By big returns, I mean that if he goes through this and comes out acquitted, or he would come back a hugely popular figure that has, showed that he is fearless, that he is courageous, and it would probably be a stepping stone for him to aspire to higher office. Because, politicians are always, scheming, all about the next, job group. And so you have to see that he's been very his strategy has actually been very different.
Prosecution has been to not have everything together.
You know, with this,
if I could speak on that,
with the ICC court, you never really know, because it's like, you know, you never really understand their strategy. A few months ago, word on the street was Uhuru's case has collapsed. There's nothing, etc. Fast forward a few months, and then you're like, wait a minute. All it takes is 1 or 2 witnesses to raise hell. And of course, there's the other issue. I think you saw one of the dailies over the weekend, and the dropping of prominent people who are potential witnesses.
I think
there's many things happening here that are not important.
I think Kenyans need to have a proper balance. The ICC is a very young court. It began in 2002. Okay?
Yes.
This court has got a very poor record of convictions.
Yes.
Let's be very, very clear. There's too much ICC euphoria, as though this is a magic one. What I want to be very clear about, I myself, personally, have been denied a visa twice to go to the ICC by the Dutch government. So there is a conspiracy of some kind between the court and the international community. There's no doubt about it. Obviously, I was director of protocol at the office of the Prime Minister. I was involved in the Annan talks. I received Kofi Annan when he came here. I have things that I can't say on public television. But I want to say, why would the ICC prosecutor not want to hear what I have to say about what happened at the material time? And I want to be very clear about this, so that the issue of, it's not just intimidating witnesses, it's also about choosing witnesses. It seems to me that if you want to be fair on a fair trial, you look both at the prosecutor and at the defense. Okay. There is no doubt that you can say that the ICC itself has handpicked the witnesses that they think suit them most. And this is one of the problems where the civil society finds itself. Somehow you find that the civil society have got better hearing or better access to so-called the ICC institution than maybe an ordinary person who was present and there. And I want to say here on TV without contradiction,
because of ideology.
Well, I don't want to talk about ideology. I want to talk about justice.
Yes.
And justice is about the experiences which you had. They were not there. He was not there in the office of the Prime Minister or at the Pentagon House. I was there daily. So
Are you saying you were there planning violence? Because I'm trying to understand what the point is.
I'm saying if I was a prosecutor,
right,
I would not tell you what I saw or heard. But if I was a prosecutor, I would want to hear, what did Tony Gachoka hear at the Pentagon House? What did he see? What happened?
But let me just answer you this way.
I want to say this because it is the integrity you're talking about. Is Ruto interfering with witnesses, or is the claims by the court?
Or eliminating even?
No, those are the allegations the prosecutor is making by the prosecutor.
Yeah.
But I'm saying you need to put the prosecutor on the mirror herself and ask, has she also ignored important witnesses who would change the course of the issue? Because first, she's an officer of the court. She's not there just to convict William Ruto. She's there to bring justice and fairness to the people of Kenya and victims. And therefore, if there is any information that is being kept away from the court, then that itself is a miscarriage of justice and one of the matters that should be handled at trial. And I would advise the lawyers of the president and the deputy president that when it does come to the case of the defense, they must demonstrate in a very convincing way that the prosecution has failed in its investigative capacity. Kenya never invited either FBI or Scotland Yard or whatever who investigated the post-election violence.
Okay.
How credible was that investigation? Okay. How credible was the Working Commission of Inquiry? Who was present in that commission of inquiry? How credible was the Kenya Human Rights Commission report? Was the Kenya Human Rights Commission capable of carrying out a nationwide
audit? Our time is running out, but Benji, there's a very important issue I want us to talk about right now: security in the country, the state of that. Vetting begins today. Senior police officers will be vetted, but in the recent past, we've seen police officers involved in crime. We've also, of course, over the years, corruption in the service, one of the biggest concerns. This has also, cases of insecurity themselves have been spiraling. What will it take? And we've also seen the government criticize the minority of politicizing this particular issue. So while there's all these words being thrown around, at the end of the day, you said yourself right now, you do not feel safe being in Kenya. What must be done?
Sophia, the answer I'm going to give you is going to shock you.
Okay, I hope I get shocked.
I actually had a working group meeting with a doctor in this country, a communications expert who has been to this station, myself and 2 other actors in the civil society, just to think through what it is that ails our society, our police and what have you.
Yeah.
Guess what? Our education system, first and foremost, is to blame, Tony, because what we do is that we do cut-off marks and scoring based on the letter that you get. If it's an A to a certain point, all those are doctors and architects. It doesn't matter what their passion is, doesn't matter what they want to do, etc. They are going for medicine. The B's are going for engineering and what have you, etc. And then the C's, polytechnic, etc. and overseas universities if they can afford it and what have you. So the question is this: who in Kenya becomes a police officer? The answer is a D student. All right? Because, you know, if we're going to do proper police reform, we are going to tackle this issue from its root and look at the reality and look at how the process of intake, many times that involves also giving a little money and saying, look, kijana wangu hakupita, he's not going to university, I don't have money for polytechnic, let me give you 50,000, take him to Kiganjo, let him become a police officer. Now, this is a person who is going to live in a shelter with 3 other officers, carrying a gun, doing 12, 14, 16-hour days, without a car, without money, without risk allowances, etc. and what have you. Tony, I think this thing, you must sit with the president and now do proper surgery to change this thing and turn it on its head. Look at the police spokeslady struggling to do grammar and sentence construction. Eloquence is the next level. Eloquence and to articulate issues, Sophia.
That is the problem,
you can imagine this is someone who is addressing an issue of, for example, allegations that 3 camps have been held, that people are marauding with AK-47s. You can imagine how sensitive this issue is, and someone cannot even speak in a manner that that inspires confidence and comfort in you. So you say, oh my God, if I get carjacked, God have mercy on me. Because as you saw the other day in Lavington, these are ex-police officers who have some of the skills for using a weapon, who are jobless, who are broke, yet in Lavington is where the money is, so to speak, because again of our social issues of the divide between the rich and the poor being as big as possible. We have to look again and say,
I agree with you.
as I give the last example, I like to give the example and people say, oh, this is not America. In the States, you have, for example, like where I lived in a middle-class suburb, a Runda kind of place. You have a doctor, an Air Force colonel, a corporate person, a business lady, and a police officer, all of them living next to each other. We cannot have this kind of segregation, you know, where then we are sending. I did some work with Kenyan PDU, Kenya Medical
so that because of time,
and dentists
I wanted to,
and you have doctors who had no interest, but the dad said, you're an A student, go and become a doctor.
One of the things that I want to agree with and appeal to His Excellency the President is that one of his greatest oaths of office, not just as Commander-in-Chief, but as President of the Republic of Kenya, is to preserve and protect the people of this country, first and foremost, lives and property. It is his biggest moral and legal duty, and therefore the President would do well to lead this from the front, so that it gets the kind of urgency that needs to take place in terms of reform, whether it's the morale issues in the police force.
Yeah, we had to talking about salary increment. We don't know if it happened this month.
So another issue they have is poor communication. Not everywhere in the country is a police officer able to communicate properly on time. The other issue, of course, even the kind of guns that they're using compared to the criminals. They just not just the infrastructure, sometimes even life-threatening. I mean, you go with a gun and it jams. I mean, it's so old.
Exactly.
And the guy who is firing with you is on a semi-automatic. And this thing. Then there is also this thing called corruption. So I really hope one day we will be able, as a media, as the fourth state, to make corruption so unattractive to this country that people will stop this vice. Because part of the problem in Kenya is that the people who steal later become the gods. Because they become members of parliament. Show off the members of parliament. MPs. They build big buildings. They drive big cars.
So people admire,
etc.
Exactly.
So sometimes you have people conspiring with people within the police force in order, first of all, not to be arrested when they commit crimes. Those crimes, some of them are economic crimes, which are sometimes more severe than these other crimes. Because if you come and loot the National Cereals Produce Board and you destroy the maize miller of Kenya, that's maybe an economic crime. Maybe it can kill millions of people, as opposed to, say, 2 people shot dead by criminals. So the police have got to also deal with so much bank fraud, economic crimes, as well as violent crime. And lastly, I want to say this. There are many young men and women of the police force who give their lives every day. Let's always not condemn them all all of them. Let's also appreciate the people who stay out at night so that we can get home, and those who give their lives in the force and in the service. You saw them in Westgate and elsewhere where they give their lives for the protection of Kenyans. But the wider issue should be led from the front by the president.
Okay. Mutudho, appointed, then found unfit by parliamentary committee, then given the green light to head Nakada. Your thoughts?
Sophia, not since the days of John Michuki has a Kenyan been so focused, been so one-track minded, if you may, tunnel vision, been so full of fire in the belly as my friend John Mutudho. His hearing raises very serious, again, legal issues, because if he's alleged to have lost 41 million shillings in a supply, but the President of the Republic of Kenya is accused of the kind of things he's alleged to have done. So what place does the parliament have to stop a guy like that from doing a job like that? Well, and that's why the whole thing of the, again, Uhuruto, eligibility and whatnot became very, very controversial. I guarantee you, Tony, you will have a minister, cabinet secretary, who loses money and says, wait a minute. In fact, you know how they run back to their communities. Wanapiga mimi na rais yeye je.
You know, on the issue of Mutudho stood out in the last parliament, not just because of his stand on alcohol and drug abuse, but even in hard work. Actually, he never missed a session. I don't remember when he was ever in Kenya whether he missed a session of parliament. He was one of the hardest working MPs of the 10th parliament. So in terms of working hard, he's a hard worker. Secondly, as you need a moral driver. Kaguthi tried very hard when he was the head of Nakada, because Nakada is not just an issue of the law and the police catching people up. It's the issue of the moral high ground, because you want teenagers and young people to feel morally that there is values back in our system, because part of the control of these problems is a value state. And I think Mutudho has shown himself to carry high moral value in terms of the fight against alcohol and drug abuse. Secondly, he's got profile. Because you need media, you need visibility, you need a lot of profile in order to be effective, in order for you to be reach everywhere.
Correct.
Lastly, he seems to have the political support, both from the executive, with parliament and elsewhere. And very few people can gain that kind of support that you need. Because again, MPs and senators will be important to effect these grassroots policies in their constituencies and within their counties. And therefore, Mutudho, for that reason, is effective in that.
Sophia, one sentence.
Tells me to wind up, but there's something I need you to comment on, Benji, please.
Yes,
madam. Less than a minute.
Cases
of road carnage. We're losing too many lives. Nothing much as is
3 words.
And we have the holiday season,
3 words.
festive season coming up.
I saw it in Dubai, I saw it in Cyprus, I saw it in Greece. Enforcement, enforcement, enforcement. If you have highways and they're not well manned, or police are taking bribes, that's the result. People will speed, people will do, because human nature is, you've got these nice cars, it's sweet to speed, there's not a cop in sight.
What
are you going to do?
They need to up their game on this particular one.
The traffic police, man.
I think
simply the police.
I think simply the police. This thing is a trio approach. The public, the public themselves sometimes sit in these matatus and they keep quiet, and you just keep quiet and you allow that. You remember when NAC first came into power and the people used to get out of matatus and deal with policemen. If you remember the public outrage on police corruption, of course, it was very visible. Why do you allow a bus to drive 100 and something? Why are you entering and overloading yourself into the public? The second one is the kind of system of driver training. There was this important thing when the president was launching Huduma Kenya, and the Matatu Association asked, can there be advanced training for drivers who are getting a PSV license? And I believe that that is a very important part, because we need drivers who are better trained and who are able to deal with the fact that they are carrying human beings and not cargo. The third issue, an important issue, is again police reform. The police must become dependable in the traffic management, and people must be put to jail. You know, not just the drivers, but even the owners. If you allow your buses to be badly maintained and you employ careless people, you ought to have what we call a criminal liability.
Of course.
Because you can't deny
what they call in the States vehicular homicide. Let me just say this, training will not stop you from overlapping. When traffic is not moving, there's not a cop in sight, the lights are not working, and there's no enforcement. That's a very important point. Finally, I think as we finish, I appeal to His Excellency the President, which is my camera, this one. Avoid the temptation to recycle. Kaguthi is a former PC, then he's a former Nakada boss. Now he is the boss of Nyumba Kumi, and then tomorrow he'll be the boss of Nyumba Nane. Please.
Yeah.
We have a lot of able Kenyans such as Tony Gachoka and others. Give young leadership a chance. We must not recycle. If it's Monday, it's the way it is.
Yes.
And again, we have another brown boy. So it's always the big bad brown boys.
My last word is Kenyans should support the video link so that the president can maintain dignity and clear his good name.
All right. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thanks, Sophia. Have a
Benji
good week.
Ndolo,
Yeah.
Founder One, and Tony Gachoka, political strategist, making our Monday morning with this analysis of some of the stories we've seen making headlines in the past couple of days. And of course, most of these stories still developing, like the one on the ICC. Will be closely watching developments there and, of course, bringing you up to speed with the goings on. But